Hey, we're here for another QEDTalks. This time we got Jess Pendley from Underground Oracle, who is making waves in the Cypher Unlimited stuff lately with the release of the Harrow the Blighted Plane, which I'm going to have the links for all of this in doobly-doo below. We're going to talk a lot about Harrow, among other things, because this isn't really an interview, it's a chit-chat. But I'm excited for it, so we're definitely going to talk about it for sure. But yeah, for the lame people that don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Who is you? Why is you?
Oh, why is me? Well, my mother and father were in love once, but no. Who is me is Jess Pendley, at Jess Pendley on all the socials. I am the co-owner and editorial manager of Underground Oracle Publishing. We're a third-party publisher, and we're currently working in the world of the Cypher system, which we're super stoked about. So
yeah, you and Keith. I mean, oh my gosh, every time I've interacted with both of you, you're just like the sweetest people. You've been the nicest people online.
Keith is referred to as sweet all the time. I'm never referred to as sweet. That might be the very first time I've ever been called sweet.
You've been nothing but nice to me every single interaction. I have not noticed any inner bitchiness. Yet, at all.
I keep it in there. It comes out. It's really, I'm more, I think it's because I'm much more of I'm a little more in your face maybe than Keith is. So I don't think the sweet isn't the descriptor they use for me. She's nice or, whatever. But
not everyone's good with bluntness and stuff. I mean, I don't do subtlety, maybe because of as we were just saying 2 seconds ago before we started recording, we both grew up in farmland or whatever. Subtlety is not a thing you learn when you're shoulder deep in a cow's asshole. You don't learn subtlety, so it's not a thing.
All nuances, it goes out the window at that point.
Yeah, you just kind of deal with it. So yeah, welcome on. I've been super excited to get more people on here in the Cypher system, the Cypher community specifically, because I've been branching out to other creators and stuff a lot lately, but I haven't, Cypher's my home right now. So I like to get that.
You were one of my selling points, actually. I'm going to tell everybody here now. When we were talking about moving over to Cypher, your videos were I was showing to Keith, and who I was showing to different people. This is so it's actually pretty cool to be here. It feels like I've come in a little full circle.
Nice. That's nice. Yeah, I try to do with the Cypher tutorial ones as well. It's the floating head thing because it's not a real picture of me. It keeps the vomiting to a minimum. This way that people can really get into it and stuff.
Yeah, they're great videos.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. All right. Let's go. So I'm going to start with the first thing I always start with everybody is one baseline question. How did you first hear about tabletop role-playing games, and did you have any preconceived notions about them before you got into the hobby?
Yeah, my preconceived notions were I grew up super rural, super isolated, so kind of the TV was my view into everything, and popular television in the early 90s wasn't kind to D&D players, so my perception of it was pretty tabletop role-playing in general was through the lens of Dungeons and Dragons, and then also very much colored by how it was represented on TV. So it was never something that I was when I saw it on TV, I was oh, these are super nerds playing this, but I was also a super nerd, so I really couldn't say anything about it, but I was a kid, so I didn't want people to look at me as a super nerd at that moment in my life. But we always use my imagination always. I mean, when you're poor and rural, you use your imagination for everything. That's kind of your bread and butter. So it came super naturally, and I had a younger brother and a younger sister, and we were constantly making up our own games and doing a lot of stuff together. So it was kind of just a natural funnel into role-playing. And I would say that my introduction to TTRPGs was not with an actual traditional pen and paper role-playing game. It was with the game Hero Quest.
Oh, yeah. I think I got a copy of it still.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that game. I fell in love with it. We played it kind of as a family. And my mom bought some of the expansion kits for it and stuff. And the idea of just being inhabiting the world of this little person, and navigating it and fighting these monsters and doing all these different things just blew my mind, because I read a lot and things, and it was that next step where it's without having to sit down and focus on anything for hours, I'm writing and living at the exact same time. And so that was it was a huge draw for me. And then I was 15-ish, I want to say, when I read the third edition Player's Handbook for the first time, which is just a gorgeous book to really look at from Dungeons and Dragons third edition. The way they have the Vitruvian Man style sketches at the beginning of each chapter and stuff. It was a gorgeous thing to look at. And I kind of fell in love with it before I ever actually got to really do it. And when I didn't get to really do it until much later, like 17 or 18, I want to say is when I first started role playing.
So you like had the books for like a little while to like drool over and be like, someone play with me, please.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. What my dad was the one that ran Hero Quest for us. Like he was the guy who like put all the little rat guys down and did all that stuff and sprung traps on and stuff. So when we got the 3rd edition books from a yard sale, we were just like, oh, Dad will just run Dungeons and Dragons for us, which is great. But I'm reading it and I'm like, there's like, you can basically suggest that you're going to do whatever you want. And my dad was definitely one of those people that was like, I don't know what ridiculous stuff a 15-year-old who's playing a tiefling bard is trying to do, but it definitely wasn't in the module that my dad was reading through. So he'd be like, and it kind of fell apart really quick because he wasn't one of those styles of GMs.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So I didn't really get to role play until a few years later. But yeah, it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, I always thought the difference between like the board games and like tabletop RPGs is like board games tells you what you can do in the rules, whereas like it's the opposite for tabletop RPGs. It tells you what you can't do, and then everything else is up for game. Like,
yes, it's amazing. I remember like what was it? I can't remember like the scenario that my dad was running us through. What are those creatures called? They're like weird hyena Lacrota. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation because I've only read it.
Gnolls or the hyena ones, I think. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
they can like mimic
or something.
Yes, they can mimic people's voice stuff. Well, we're like walking around and we think we hear a kid like getting, he needs help. So we like run and it's actually apparently like a baby Lacrota that's being trained by its mother to like hunt adventurers or whatever. But like 2 different people at the table, like nat 20 and killed him immediately. So then my dad was just like, I have no idea what to do from here. It was off the rails from the very beginning. So I didn't get the real experience till a little while later, but it was a great time.
Oh, especially with teenagers. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think everyone always looks back at their teenage years and goes, I said those things. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm so glad that I'm not a teenager now because I would be, I can't imagine. It's just absolutely unbearable. I was unbearable. I had the benefit of not being recorded or the ability to post it for everybody to see. So I dodged a bullet there.
Yeah. I mean, I look older than I am. I'm looking fucking 50 or something. I'm in my 30s. So like, we're like in those generation gaps or generations where like we grew up with the internet, but like I can't imagine the kids nowadays growing up with this internet because this is a very different internet. And like all the stupid shit, it's there forever.
Yeah, exactly.
My stupid shit's gone for the most part, unless like one of my like old friends comes by. It's like, hey, remember when you did that stupid shit?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and those people are long gone by now. My past has been burnt to the ground, thankfully. So never coming back to bite me in the ass.
Now, speaking of old things from the past. Now, you were hoping I wasn't going to ambush you with anything, but there's one thing you said, a very bold statement. You took a very firm stance that I think we need to talk about. And you said, and I quote, I will never get tired of hipster Disney princesses. And I want to know, is this still a thing? You said never. You were very firm on this stance. And if people are going to buy into Harrow, they need to know this stuff.
They need to know the real Jess Pendley. I knew this was going to be a gotcha interview. I'm fucking out. This is ridiculous. It really depends. Like, to be quite honest, I don't 100% remember what you're talking about right now.
That was from December of 2012.
December of 2012.
I dug deep.
There we go. Here's what I can tell you. Between 2012 Jess and 2023 Jess, a lot has changed, and I have certainly had my fill of hipster Disney princesses. I think that cap was met probably sometime early 2013, if I had to take a guess. That was a bold statement.
People can change. They're not always locked into who they were.
No.
So.
2012 Jess didn't realize just exactly what she was saying and how inundated the world would be with hipster Disney fucking princesses.
There you go. All right. Now, we got to talk about Harrow a little bit because I'm like super excited about this. Of course, we got to get into that. So like, obviously RPGs is a different type of game than any other game. you live the world, you get into it, like the memories you create. It's more akin to when I sit down and read a book or whatnot, where like it feels like I've done it, like stuff like this. Harrow looks pretty cool. Do you want to like describe a little bit, like what is the Harrow setting like all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a world that is in the aftermath of a great cataclysm that happened on this very high fantasy realm. So it's post-apocalyptic, but it's also fantasy. So, you're not finding remnants of like, motorcycles and mopeds out in the wastes or anything, but you are finding things that might be similar to like high magitech or things like that. So it's also very grounded in like very high fantasy, but, hundreds of years after something absolutely horrible has wrecked and changed the plane forever. There's all these very, very cool effects from this blighted crystalline energy that sweeps through the plane, and it's changed everything in all these really, really fantastic ways. But the people that still live on Harrow, the people of the Four Nations, instead of taking the typical, we're in a dying world approach, the way they see it is we're on an upswing. We're out from underneath the heel of the people who controlled this plane before the cataclysm. And we have all this freedom to use, and we have, a wide open realm of possibility ahead of us. So they roll with the punches. And so it's despite the fact that it's incredibly dangerous and there's all these mutated creatures and there's like these massive water sands that you have to traverse that you could like fall into, or you could be mutated at any point by crystal ball energy. These people still face everything very positively. It's more of a like, I'm thinking about the world that I'm building for myself and for my people tomorrow, rather than the circumstances that I'm in today or the circumstances that we've had to get past. So it's a cool approach in my mind. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think it's a very cool approach to, a post-apocalyptic theme, which is, just that belligerent hope in the face of what could be, I mean, if you're worried that you're going to walk out of your door and get, mutated or eaten by a massive creature, it might be hard to be positive sometimes, but these people manage to pull it off in their own different ways. So it's very cool.
I like that. Like I'm a big fan of post-apocalyptic. I think everyone that plays role-playing games has obviously played a good chunk of their time in fantasy realms, so we're all pretty familiar with it. And especially if you look at the biggins that have tried to do like post-apocalyptic fantasy, like with Dark Sun and stuff, like that's never coming back. So you guys are the thing now. And I like that. Like you've taken that like concept, you've cranked the fantasy aspect to like 11. We just get to like go ham with it. That sounds really, really effing cool. And the fact that you like, I didn't realize like about the aspect of this is kind of like almost like a hopeful presence by the sounds of it, like where it's like we're rebuilding, we're doing good. I like post-apocalyptic. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but the world is just such a depressing place right now. I think we all kind of need something a little bit brighter, a little bit more hopeful. So
yeah. And I mean, and the thing is, like, everybody has those times where you're like, you want to play in those grimdark settings, or you want to be like a little speck of light in the overwhelming darkness, or all these different themes that you can do. But I think, like you said, with the state of the world and everything, we wanted to kind of come out of the gate with something a little more positive, and something that, people could get lost in kind of a good way and still have that fun, because like I love post-apocalypse as a genre. I absolutely love it. But it can get pretty dark, understandably. And, there's sometimes there's, things that like I love Beyond Thunderdome is my favorite Mad Max movie by far. And it is, as an actual film, probably a lot of plot holes and things that we could talk about, but it's just great. And it's
good camping.
It does have that more like positive bent on the series, so that was kind of something we wanted to capture. And like, we love the movie Treasure Planet like a lot. So we definitely put a lot of the vibes in there.
So underrated.
Yes, yeah. It's one of the best Disney cartoons out there. So we took what we loved from it for like the sand ships and just like, we took that vibe, and then also Waterworld. We really loved Waterworld. Also not the most positive post-apocalyptic environment, but we took like a lot of aspects of that, and then, kind of just put our own lean on all of it. So it's going to be it's going to be a fun escapist post-apocalypse is what we're trying to offer you. Something that you can live out those like Mad Max dreams without having to, worry about a lot of the darker aspects of it, but still feel that danger, because I also think that's important to having like a fun role-playing session in my mind. Like when I'm playing someone, I want to know that I'm in a little bit of danger. Otherwise, what am I risking what's my reward? You know what I mean? So that's still in there too.
Yeah, I find a lot of the modern post-apocalyptic stuff, like The Walking Dead, Last of Us, stuff like that. It's very much you're a regular person. The world is fucked. You're fucked. Have a nice day. Whereas like this, I kind of like this idea just because it's like the world is still kind of fucked. You got to deal with that. But at the same time, you've incorporated the elements of fantasy of like you're the heroes, you're the light, you can do shit. And I think we all kind of need that right now. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I like it. I like where this is going. Once again, if you're watching, the Kickstarter is not only still going on, but it's going on strong. Like they met the goal very quickly. You're already past the first stretch goal. Let's see here. The digital art wallpaper pack, which will be important for streamers like me. So that's good. And digital player's guide and Roll20 conversion. Not Foundry. Okay, I'm upset.
Oh, Foundry's core part of it. Yeah, Foundry's already
core part of it. Okay. Yeah. All right. Oh,
so
yeah.
The
I
Foundry
see it now.
version. Yeah, Foundry's guaranteed. If we hit the next stretch goal, in addition to the digital players handbooks, we'll also have the Roll20 conversion that will be added to people's stuff.
I can't see you not hitting it at this point. You're pretty damn close from what if I look here. I think you're at.
We're right there. That and our backer goal, which adds sand ship customizations, which is incredibly rad.
So you can put my own horn if they don't get to the sand ship customization. There's always my Cypher Foundation book. Go check it out.
Yeah, exactly. If we fail, you've always got.
Although honestly, your stuff would be more geared towards like the ship, rather like mine's like on like large community building and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean that sounds rad though. Get his and play it in Haro. That
sounds good to me. Makes a match. I legit will probably be doing at least like a mini campaign on my Sunday live streams in Haro once it's out. I'm very excited. Then reviewing it once it's out, try tear it apart, say how much it sucks.
I'm terrified at that moment.
I tried to do it with your like little like
shorts,
the shorts or whatever. I'm like, I'm going to tear this apart. I don't know who these people are, and I'm like, they're actually really good. Okay.
Yeah, when you sent me that message, it was so serious. I was like, this guy's gonna fuck us into the ground. he's out for fucking blood. He's not playing around.
I do that.
Yeah, but I was like, that's good though, because we're gonna know right off the bat if we're doing something wrong. So I like that, and that was Keith too, because I was like super nervous. I'm like, fuck, he's so important, and Keith's like, well, that's good though, because I
try to be upfront about that stuff. I've got a couple of reviews for RPGs coming out in the next week that. The Canadian me feels so bad, but they were really bad. I couldn't say it any other way. And I'm going to be upfront and truthful. So that I got some ones coming out that they ain't going to like. But I says it as it is. And it's you guys like great layout job, like good planning. It was all really solid. Like and they were specific enough to make a good story, but generic enough you could easily have reflavored them. I think I mentioned that in my review.
Yes.
Like the ballroom one, I'm like, that could have been sci-fi. That could have been like anything. And it was really good. So check those out too. They're like a couple of bucks a pop. Like, come on.
And they're even cheaper as add-ons for the Kickstarter that we're running right now.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah. Make that a thing, people. Come on.
And we have a special collection of previously unreleased Cypher shorts that are specific to Haro. So those are available there too, which will be pretty fun.
Those ones I did see about. I think you had a tweet about it or whatnot. I followed it closely. So looks pretty good. I cannot wait. So definitely check out the Haro. This is our spot of the chat where it's like sort of product plug, but I'm like, they're not sponsoring me or anything. I just really think it's cool shit.
One of the aspects that we kind of built into Haro, because it is this ever shifting plane, which we have if you go to the Kickstarter page or if you go to Spotify and look for Underground Oracle Presents, we created a free audio fiction podcast, 3-episode podcast that sort of introduces people to the world of Haro. It's by Joel Rigetti. It's very, very good. He does a great job with the story, but it goes through like how the plane fell, and it sort of gives people an introduction to the plane from an outsider's perspective as well. But one of the aspects of Haro is that there are these, in the water sands, there are these risen ruins and islands that might come up unexpectedly, at various times. So there's always a way to kind of expand the topography for either a limited time or a permanent time, depending on what the GM would like to do. So you could introduce a whole new, nation if you wanted to. You could have a rune pop up that's got some weird special quality just because you want to kind of fuck around with it for one session, and then it like sinks down beneath the water sands. So there's a lot of opportunities to bring in outside materials or outside ideas into Haro to kind of spring on your players and see how they react, and make it a permanent or just a temporary part of the world.
Those are always the best kind of settings. The reusability, the ability to refresh it and stuff. Like with like standard Cypher, we got like the Strange and Path of the Planebreaker. My own setting, when I can finally get it done, hopefully by first quarter next year, Horus is going to have a similar feature, except that's more of a hard sci-fi thing.
Nice.
And those types of settings are always beauty, because you can be like, you've got your central thing, whether it's your ship or home base or whatever, to give you that ground. But then, it's got that like Stargate or Sliders feel where it's like, hey, something new could pop up out of nowhere. And that's great for like long running campaigns and shit, for sure.
Yeah, definitely is. I'm a big fan of it. And the mound is the central city of, it's one of the 4 nations of Haro, but it's basically like this massive vertical city on the face of Haro, and that's kind of where a lot of the adventures launch off from. And the core book includes an adventure that basically takes the players through setting up their own scrap house, which is what the adventurers of the plains kind of work out of. And kind of takes you through the entirety of the city and out into the wastes and back, so that you can experience what it's like kind of building one of these independent establishments from the ground up, and what you might have to face like politically inside of the city, and what you might have to do outside. So that's also another thing that GMs can easily expand upon, because it gives you that home base, and then you can add in like different little encounters and things that you want to along the way.
I'm a big fan of home bases. Getting players that familiar section that is theirs, I think makes a campaign a billion times better than if they're just like wandering adventurers. If you're the murder hobos and nothing else, I always feel like it misses a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And I'm sure that's, again, not to yuck anybody's yum. That's just not my style of playing, but at all. And I also I really don't have any experience playing that way. Like when I've played in our campaigns and stuff, it's been very much like, I've never experienced being a murder hobo, or even like that's never been a thing that I've done. But it's because when we play a very immersive style. So sometimes I'm closer to the NPCs of the world than I am the other people at the table, just by what character I'm playing or whatever. Yeah. And our style of play is very much like, as far as the world is concerned, there's no difference between the actual real life person at the table and the NPC the GM is playing. So that's kind of the approach that we all take too. So just randomly murdering people has never really been in the cards, because it's like, oh, that's my best friend.
Yeah, it really depends on your style of play. Like I run a fairly usually a fairly narrative heavy game myself. That's just my style. That's why I gravitated to things like Cypher and Fate.
Yeah.
But like I still play in like my buddies like D&D, like started out as Curse of Strahd campaign where I'm literally playing a murderer. So like, and we're wandering. So I'm literally a murder hobo. Different style of play. It's fun. I think Taryn's gonna have me, Indestructible Boy's gonna have me in like a Morkborg meat grinder at some point. So it's nice to switch it up once in a while. But I will say that narrative, I like to craft a story. I like I've got a spot coming up in Windermere Fantasy Online, my Sunday game, that I'm pretty sure I'm going to get 1 or 2 players to cry. So I like
the
games
holy grail right there.
So.
Yeah, that's always great, man. Like, I'm not a crier. That's not my thing. If I like a big girl, I hoard it all up, and then like once a quarter, I have a breakdown in the shower, like you're supposed to.
Yeah, you ugly cry in the shower, so then
exactly, and then reset, good to go, no emotions for the rest of the time. But if I have been in a table multiple times during a story where, like, in character, we've all been just like crying. It's been great. It's been such a good moment, especially because like one of our players is just a straight up lumberjack, like literally and figuratively. But he'll be like massive beard, just like tearing up, just at the table, and it's such a great moment. I absolutely love it, and I'll be like, I'm trying to make eye contact with him to be like, yeah, cry.
Are you crying? Are you letting it go? All right. I love it. So you've been creating cool shit for a while now. I see with your forum for Fan Right Fridays coming back in 2014, or FWF for short, which is not really that much shorter. Let me be honest here. You've been trying to write shit for a while, eh?
Okay, so when you really went digging, this is amazing.
I went digging, yeah.
Yeah. So when we first started, we've always been creative, and we've always had all these worlds and stuff, and we constantly role played. But our original thoughts were basically to create like comic books in these worlds, and so I have a drawer full of scripts and things, and there's one day these will be out too, but yeah, so we started a comic book news site called comicscripts.com. So that's what I did first. That was kind of my first like public thing. And then kind of adjacent to that, I started a thing on this forum called, and I met some really rad people, one of which I still talk to this day, called Fan Write Fridays, where we would do like these themes of like these short comic scripts basically. So it was a way to like interact with people and then also kind of like also get my own stuff out there a little bit. But yeah, so it was a fun, great thing. I didn't know you could still find it on the internet.
The forum still exists. I visited it today. It's still there. It's got like 3 threads on it. All that. Did any of those stories that you crafted, do they stick with you? Like, have you carried any of them on to like Haro or anything else that you've done more recently?
So the Fan Write Friday stuff, no, because it was more like themed. So it would be like, you know, I was like write a different version of Spider-Man or something like that, you know, or you know, whatever the theme for the day was. Now in the big giant file in the corner, we have scripts for Haro. We have, you know, we have so many settings. Like I can rattle off names all day long, like our core fantasy setting, everything. So we have all these different stories that are waiting to either be turned into novels or turned into comic books or turned into whatever, you know. But yeah, that was our first. We always were telling stories to each other, and you know, and doing what we're doing right now. We were just only interested at that point in putting out like our literal story, and then there came a point where we were like, what if we told the story of the world and let other people do what we're doing, which is build their stories in it too, you know? And that became like big, like, oh, that was a, kind of an aha moment for us. And then it would also be an avenue for, you know, I mean, I think of characters all the time, but, you know, I can't play them all, but what I can do is I can make you play them because I put them in a book, and then you have to interact with my character that I made that I think is super rad. So it's a great thing to do, and it's a way for us to be able to get those worlds out in front of people, which is awesome.
I'll be honest, I tried to do the comic book thing at one point because like I'm an artist as well, and yeah, writing the books is a lot easier than trying to do it. I'm not an artist. Because like you have to find someone that can do the art with it, and then you got to write the cohesive story. And yeah, I like doing the RPGs. It's a little easier. It's actually easier. Well, it's more
easier.
It's more work, but it's easier.
It is more work, but it's more work that I can personally do, which I'm okay with. You know what I mean? Because we've never had more than we're just now to a point where we both have the time to be able to do this in the first place, which is why we didn't, despite the fact that we were doing a bunch of stuff before, it was all like after work or during work, which is why I got fired from my job when we were running Comics Drugs. Oh, no. Because that became the priority. And I was young and stupid. But yeah, we're just now to a point where we've been able to really dig into Underground Oracle Publishing and do these things. And we've never, ever had a budget. And we still don't really have a budget. So the most, you know, as much work as we can personally do, we like to do ourselves. And working in the realm of TTRPGs, we get to do 99% of the work for ourselves, which is super nice. The only thing that we can't really do, you know, is the art on a general basis. So we have to hire that out. But with a comic book, I can write the script, and that's amazing. But nobody wants to read a comic script. What they want to do is look at a comic book, and that's a lot of people that you have to pay, and you have to, you know, get on board with you. So comic books are a much more expensive endeavor for a writer, an independent writer, I would say, than TTRPGs are. And that's maybe 100%. Just my take on it, but that's... Yeah.
100%. Because like, yeah, I've been looking for my upcoming books and stuff. I'm doing some of the art myself, but it's time consuming. I can't do it all. So I've been looking at people to commission for some of the stuff, and most of them are not too bad. I always worried the commissions are going to be more expensive than they were. It's not too bad considering what they're doing. Like, it's a massive amount of work.
Yeah.
But it's nothing compared to doing like full page comic spreads. That would bankrupt me easily. So yeah.
Yeah.
Easy.
Because it's like if you're lucky and find an artist who's willing to do all the art, because the art for comic books is separated, into like pencils, inks, colors, all that stuff. So if you're lucky to find someone that's like, I'll do it all, you still have to find someone to do the lettering. You still have to, there's so much talent that goes into a comic book issue that I think people from the outside don't necessarily really think about, but it's just so much, effort and talent is put into an issue of a comic book. So it's expensive.
Well, thankfully, we're in a create your own adventure type thing. So once you've got the main book done, you don't have to like keep reissuing monthly things for it. So yeah, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier. I think any of us that have designed shit, like it's the way to go for those of us that want to craft a way for you to tell stories for everyone and everyone that tells stories. Now, so one of the things I wanted to get into, like a talking point here, is the fact that like as games have progressed, as the hobby has evolved, I want to say, I won't say like narrative hasn't like taken over per se, like, but you do like things like Critical Role have like influenced a lot of newer players, and they realize, okay, it just doesn't have to be like a beat fest where we just go kill shit and nothing else. Like you can actually get really good storylines out of it. With narrative systems like Fate, Cypher, things like that, I find players get a lot more meta knowledge and agency over the storyline. How have you handled this? Because you said you've been playing for a while, since like 3rd edition, so you've been seeing this as well. How have you handled this at your tables? Is it like a comfortable transition for you, or was it an adjustment?
To be honest, our style of role playing at the table, our style of the way that we run our games or play our games has changed almost not at all, because we always played that way, to be quite honest with you. Whether the rules really help support that or not, that was just the way that we played our games. So the actual transition to how we were playing and running those games really hasn't been tough for us at all. We've always been very lore first in our creation. We've always been very, narrative focused in our stories. So that was super great, because Cypher kind of super smooth transition, no problem there. The one weird thing, and I won't say was weird to us, was like, I'm used to doing the yes and improv style of stuff. Like I'll always be a player forever if I can be. That's like I preferred player. Keith's the GM for us. So I'm used to like bouncing off of him, bouncing back, building the story with him, etc. The idea of player intrusions was the one like weird sticking point for me in the Cypher system, because I had never really, just because I wasn't used to giving up that sort of narrative control to the table. It was that like it's incredibly explicit. It's like, no, I don't want that to happen, or I want this to happen instead. You know what I mean? So that was kind of an alien concept to kind of work around. But I think that was just because we have such in our home games and stuff, we have such a comfortable back and forth already that it almost didn't seem necessary. And it was handled in a much more like, I guess, subtle kind of sneaky way, because we were still doing it. It just wasn't a thing where it was like a mechanic, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that you actually did. It was just something that sort of happened organically. So that's the only adjustment I would say that I've had to make, is sort of like conceptualizing that. Because even though I'm not often the game master, it's still, for some reason, I was very much like, oh my gosh, you're just like, you just get to do what you want. I'm like, that's very, very weird. But there's a lot of systems that do that. It's just we worked mostly in systems that didn't do that, and then kind of put our own role playing on top of it. Because, like you said, D&D has very recently become narrative focused in the community. The actual rules themselves, you would definitely argue there are games that support that better. The good thing about 5th edition was that you could ignore anything that you didn't like and just kind of like roll the dice and move forward. And I think that's why a lot of people were so pulled to it and are still pulled to it, because it's hard to argue to learn a different system if you're like, well, I can just ignore the things I don't like, or just like fudge at the table with advantage or disadvantage. It's very easy for everybody, because what people like myself might want to do is like, I just want to role play, so who cares what what the rules are. I'm rolling a 20 to decide whether or not I succeed or I fail, but I get to act out my character. And that's been like a big thing in the D&D community recently. But it wasn't definitely when I started. Like, we were very much the outliers of how we were playing and running our games. It was much more of like the World of Darkness kids in the back of the room. Like, it was more similar to the way they were playing than anybody else.
Do any of the World of Darkness stuff yourself? Because I did like Vampire LARP for a while. Like, I went full goth kid in the corner. Like,
I've never LARPed. I love Changeling so much, like old school Changeling. I loved it so much. The idea of everything about that I fell in love with. Werewolf I love because I love werewolves. I'm a big werewolf nerd. Those were the two that, and then I like it was funny. Like I liked Hunter, things like that, but I really never. I played some Changeling, but didn't really play World of Darkness as much as I just enjoyed reading the books and like reading the source books and things like that. Like I poured through all the Kith books and stuff, but never really got to play. Just kind of like, oh, I wish I could.
I think my favorite description in that entire like old World of Darkness thing was the description of the werewolf in the vampire books, because it was like this giant, hairy, powerful beast covered in blood. Yours. That's awesome. Because like, yeah, the vampire goes toe to toe with the werewolf. You're done. Like, yeah. Which I always thought was kind of funny. I haven't played those games in years. Jeez. Yeah. It's hard to tell, but considering I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt now, but yeah, I was a goth kid for a while.
Tropical goth. It's a look. You're tropical goth. The goth's on the inside.
Yeah. But like that didn't last long. Next thing I knew, I was wearing like shorts and like random plaid shirts with like the trench coat over top and like socks and sandals. People were like, "What are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know.
I'm dressed and I'm in public." I've always admired the goths because that's a commitment to like taking care of yourself that I've just never had. It's like
it was too much work for me. Like I did the nail polish for a while and stuff like that, and eventually I'm like, I'm too lazy for this. This is not my style. It was a bit of a transfer for me going to the narrative stuff, because like when I started playing in 93, 94, it was with AD&D 2nd edition. So like Wizards of the Coast hadn't bought it out. It was still TSR at that point. In the game, my first DM was a nightmare. For the first like 3 years that I played. If your character lived that weekend, it's probably because you bought him treats. I saw a guy lose 7 characters in one session. Like that was the style of game that we started with.
Wow.
And then of course, like at that time period, D&D was not doing well. I've mentioned this in plenty of my other things before. That's like, if you went to a convention, you're like, oh, I only play D&D. People would be like, really? But there's like all this. And then when things started to transfer narrative, I can't think of when we started really just handling things more narrative. I actually think it was with other systems that we did it, and then we brought it to D&D. But it was a bit of a change. And then, for us, I think the big thing about player agency, it wasn't until we tried Fate, because we did Fate before we did Cypher, and Fate has like, it's like, for those that don't know, Fate's kind of has the same thing as like player intrusions, but like stepped to 11, where like the player can just be like, look at me, I'm the GM now. And like take over the scene. So that helped us ease into Cypher, where it's like, that's kind of like that lighter, a little more balanced. Cypher to me is that happy medium. It's got the crunch if you want a bit of crunch, but it's not like 99% combat rules like D&D or something is, or Pathfinder.
It's great. I mean, and I've probably said this like 50 times in the last couple of weeks, but Cypher did feel like such just a natural fit, because it does have, like you said, it's got the mechanics if you want the mechanics. It's narrative driven. I mean, if you read, I wish that as one of their little freebies, Monty Hook Games would just take the how to run a game section in the back of that Cypher rulebook and just put it out to people, because literally any system, I think you should read it, but it's just a great guide to like the ideas of the Cypher system. And it's a great, if you're transitioning from a different system like D&D or something, like it removes a lot of those stressors, I think, that people feel like that you kind of develop in a system like D&D or like in Pathfinder or something like that, where it's like, oh, I got to balance these encounters. I got to make sure, this player is as good as this player. Stuff, and it removes that completely. And I love the attitude that has kind of just been built into the bones of the system by the people at Monty Hook Games, and it's carried into the community from what I can see. And I love that. Like, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, if anyone watches this and they don't, like, they're still just trying to understand what Cypher is. If you are afraid to run a game, Cypher is the game for you, because you really only need like your main story beats, kind of like maybe some improv skills and how to count from 1 to 10, and you're good. Like, bingo. That's pretty much all you need to know. I actually have like, in my games, I only have 3 rules new players need to know. They're basically the rules stolen from Fate. It's like, don't let the rules get in the way of the narrative. Anything can be like a character sheet, and I forget what the third one is off the bat, but like there's only 3 things they need to know, and you can play. That's fine. That's all you need. Yeah.
It's great. And it was kind of it was nice, because like when we made the pivot to officially made the pivot to Cypher from Dungeons and Dragons, it was kind of stressful. You know what I mean? So like,
well, it was a stressful time.
Yeah.
We won't get into it too much. Plenty of people with a much less smooth brain than me have covered that. But it was a tough time.
It was stressful, and it was stressful as creators to be like, we're going to have to make our way into this new community, and especially with coming from having made our way into the community that we were in, and like kind of like the trials and tribulations that you go through when you're establishing yourself in a new scene, and a new portion of any community, but of the TTRPG community. And it was super refreshing to interact with the Cypher people. And not to say that anyone that plays any other system is not awesome or something like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, we got such a warm welcome that I was kind of blown away. Like, I feel like a lot of systems kind of want you to like prove yourself and justify your existence for being there, and do the thing where they try to tear apart something that you're doing to either prove that you're not doing it good enough or to prove that they can break it in some way or another. And that just doesn't exist in the cyber community, at all. It's as a creator, it was just very refreshing, and it helped with our transition greatly because it removed that stressor for us. It was just awesome.
And I'm sorry for anyone that thinks we're just like proselytizing for Cypher. We are. Suck it up.
Yes.
It's that great. And I gotta say, like, part of that, like, Monica Games did an amazing job. Like, all of the creatives, like Shauna, Bruce, Sean, all of them were absolutely amazing. But like, a lot of credit also, I think, has to be given to Al, Anthony, and Dean, and like the entire Cypher Unlimited community, because I cannot think of any other RPG that has like a singular cohesive community like Cypher does. I can't think of a single one. It's amazing, the fact that there's like a community to join. So
it is. That was awesome, and I was afraid to jump on that Discord when it was suggested to me, because I was like, it's another Discord, first of all, and I was like, it's always scary. And then I jumped on and was like, hey guys, and everybody was super cool. And then I went on their show, and they were even cooler than I thought they were going to be. And it's just, they definitely have had an impact on the sphere. And I think it's cool that like Monte Games has really embraced that by like pushing that as kind of like their Discord community. And I think it's done it's done all of us a service, because it really set a vibe that I think we can all enjoy.
Well, Monica Games is, I found, like, after like interacting with a lot of them personally and stuff like that, like they've remembered things that certain large corporations I shall not name have forgotten. Like they sort of demand, like, if you're going to be in any position in the group, that you are a gamer, like you are a part of the community, you're part of the hobby. There's certain companies that are forgetting that aspect, I think. But like, they're all just nerds. They just want to make cool shit and play games. That's all they want. They're not in it to be like mega corporations or anything. Let's do a little side thing here for a second. I like to like throw little curveballs here just to see what people would answer. If you had to design your own system, say someone came to Underground Oracle, they're like, here's like $1 trillion. You can't say no to that. It's enough to buy like 3 cartons of eggs these days. You need to design your own system, but you only can use one of the polyhedral dice, or one of the shape of the polyhedral dice. Which die would you choose and why?
D12.
The D12.
I have no reason for that other than it's my fucking favorite. Like, it's and the style of characters. The style of characters that I used to play in D&D, I did not often get to use a D12, despite the fact that it's my favorite die. I always played big punchy dum-dum, so I was always using my fist, or I would play like your little light fighter, so I was never swinging, anything that I could use a D12 for. And I remember there was a spell in the 3.5 spell compendium, I believe it was called Jungle Razor or something, and it was a spell that only hurt like plants and fae, but you got to throw like a fistful of D12s for it. And so I took it every time I was a spellcaster. It didn't matter what my opinion was of plants or fae, I had that spell, because I was like, I'm going to throw a fucking D12 during this game at some point. But that's it. Just the aesthetics and the feel of the D12 is what won me over.
I feel like a lot of people would choose that. Like, I've actually legitimately seen 1 or 2 systems lately that actually are just using D12s, which is blowing my mind. But there's a good feel to it, because it's like round enough that it's complicated, but it's not like the D20 level of randomization. And I could see that. I could totally see that. Yeah. I probably I would be torn between either the D12 once again for the aesthetics, because I fully agree with that, or just D6s because you can find them in any board game. They're the easiest to use. It's boring, but it is
for just like a simple dice pull mechanic too. Like I love just like, and it's something that Keith and I are split on. Keith's not as into like the D6 dice pool style like mechanics.
Like
I love them. I think it's great.
Type of thing, or yeah. Okay, so here's another important thing to Harrow. Once again, sort of going back to your past here, will Salty Legs Sally and her crew possibly make it into Harrow? That was like your custom character. You made a picture of Salty Legs Sally and her crew. I was wondering if they were going to come over.
Oh, fuck. Now I feel obligated. Yes, Salty Legs is there. Honestly, yeah, like we've a lot of our, because we love nautical stuff, but I was I wanted to do something weird. So this campaign clearly has a lot of nautical influence in it because there's, sand ships and they're all like, based on typical high fantasy things. So yes, I cannot believe you went so far into my past. I completely fucking forgot any of this stuff.
Yeah, that blank look in your face. I was like, oh, did I fuck up? Was that not her?
Oh my God.
But yeah, yes, I saw you had like this custom like pirate crew, and I'm like, well, that kind of fits into Harrow. I wonder if she's gonna bring that over. You had like art done for it and everything. So yeah.
Oh man, yeah, oh my gosh, like you're blowing my mind here. Yeah. Also, and I don't know if this is true to every creator in the world, but definitely here, we come up with so much stuff all the time that we have logs of it. So like, if I'm not consistently using something, it's a footnote somewhere that will come back at some point. But it's kind of like it just like leaves my mind. Like I haven't thought about Salty Legs for fucking ever.
Yeah.
Like at all.
Yeah, I've got like Google Docs, like a whole section of just like random notes, and like sometimes I won't even know what they mean and be like, "What do you mean glowing pumpkin? What is that referencing?" Yeah. Yeah.
And you always come back to it too. Like we have so many notebooks and so much. So like it always comes full circle. That's the way that these things always work. But it's like Harrow was something we worked on as something completely different over a decade ago, and was going to be something entirely different, and then just developed into what it is today. Mm-hmm. And pieces of Harrow have pieces of things that we started developing with some other concept or idea in mind, but then we're like, oh, actually, we'll put it here in this world, and we'll shape it and polish it to fit in, in this world. So the spirit's still there, but it's very, very changed from what it used to be, and you don't even really realize how much it's evolved until you like look at that like base scrap of paper that this thing was on like a decade ago, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is the same thing. So yeah, for all I know, Salty Legs may be in Harrow somewhere. We'll find out.
Gotta be. All right. Yeah, it's amazing. It's hard to trim everything down that you like want to put into something too, because like my rough draft for Oris, the setting that I'm doing in Cypher, last I checked, it's going to clock in at like 450 pages. I'm like, I gotta cut that down. Yeah,
that's kind of where we were too. That's the most difficult part, is being like, what is the core book of Harrow, especially because we had to kind of be a little more modest with this than we might be going forward, because this is a brand new system. This is our that we're presenting ourselves in. This is our first full setting book that we're trying to produce. This is the first full 30-day Kickstarter that we've done. We've done one Kickstarter previously, and it was a 14-day quick start for a 50-page flat book. So this is an entirely different arena, and we are big idea people that have decades of work to try to pare down into being like, what is essential to get people in Harrow and get people exploring Harrow and evoking those feelings and those stories that we want people to have and to be able to tell, and what can be set aside and released as supplementary material going forward. And we have the benefit of kind of having the supplement model already in the back of our minds, because that's what we were doing for 5th edition for a few years. So we know that we'll release the Harrow core book, and then if we would like to release like specific cool things about the mound, because we couldn't make the mound 4 times bigger than every other nation presented in the book, we can release it as a supplement. Or if we want to really dig deep into the Great Oasis and all the different flora and fauna that are there, we can release another supplement that has more of that stuff in it. So it's a strange balance to kind of walk, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by making a 600-page world guide, and then falling. But you also want to make sure that what you're giving people is actually a core book. Like, you have what you need to play and experience the world. So it's delicate, but there will be horror supplements coming out, definitely, because we do not have the guts to put out a 400-page world book.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think it was the same advice that I forget if it was Sean or Shauna, like Shauna King Reynolds or Shauna Germain had mentioned, but they're like, yeah, just don't worry. Like, I know you've got a big project and that's awesome. Don't release a big project, release a bunch of smaller projects. Just give them, people will be perfectly happy, even if they only have part of it off the bat, and you build from there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm getting carried away.
That is true. And I mean, I think, and to go back into, I guess, more of the D&D creator sphere, I think, MT Black kind of does that with Iskandar. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation because I've only read it. But like, he's releasing like sort of pieces and then like expanding it into this massive world, and kind of the same thing that Keith Baker has been expanding on Eberron since Eberron dropped.
Oh, so I checked out his books. Though if I still played D&D, they're impressive. Yeah. Way better than something Wizards was putting out directly. That's for sure.
Yeah.
They were good stuff. All right. Time is getting away on us, as it always does in these. I'm like, it's going to clock in an hour. I don't think a single one of these have gone an hour. So we're gonna do the end.
Too delight to talk to is the problem.
Oh, thanks. So we're gonna do the end part here. What I usually do at the end is I get a couple of questions out that I've gotten from like the community or a community, or stolen relentlessly from somebody. I forget where half the time. And we try to answer them together. I haven't really thought about them. I'll like peruse them a quick one to make sure it's not bad stuff. And then we'll try to answer them together and see. I've disagreed with some people. I've agreed with some people, and kind of see where our styles go. So we have, let's start with Lunar Goblin Dice asks, what are some tips for keeping players engaged during really long dialogue heavy sessions?
I guess from the GM perspective, for me, a good way to keep the players engaged is to, first of all, everybody's participating in the dialogue. Yeah. So that's super important. So between the players interacting with one another, and from the NPCs, from the GMs into the table, kind of interacting with everybody. So like, I play a lot of very dialogue heavy sessions. I've never had the problem where I've been bored during those, but that's just because that's my bread and butter. I love that. Like, I could play a clerk style game where everybody's just talking forever, and I'm fine with that. But there are people that you kind of have to, as another player, what I will do is I'll get them involved. If I notice that somebody's kind of standing back or whatever, I'll address them in character and be like, what's your read on the situation, or, whatever it might be appropriate to, or make a joke or something, that gets people kind of pulled back in. As the GM, I think peppering into the dialogue, kind of like, if you are not comfortable yourself creating those reactions on your face or whatever, making sure you pepper in, like, you notice the person is, when they're saying things, describe kind of the faces they're pulling or the expressions they're making, to kind of breathe a little more life into the dialogue. But I think just making sure the whole table's involved in one way or another goes a long way. So like, even if you've got, the classic rogue in the corner that's really just stepping back and not in the conversation and just watching everybody, throw something his way that maybe he notices that he can get to the other players. Like, this guy's saying this, but you notice, he's toying with something on his belt while he's talking or whatever, So get people involved in different ways that kind of keeps them focused on the scene. I think that would be the way that I would handle it personally.
That's pretty much the same thing I would have answered. It's a lot of, I think I've discussed this on someone else's channel before, but some of the onus is on the players. If it's dialogue heavy, obviously, like, the players are doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. Like, those are the types of sessions where I, as a GM, might sit back and not say anything for 45 minutes. It's like, if you've got good players. But a good player should also, when they have the spotlight, should be trying to drag other people into the spotlight with them. I know I've always been a forever GM, but lately I've gotten to be a player a little bit more and more. And I was a bad player at first because I was a forever GM for too long. I had to actually put little sticky notes being like, you're not the fucking GM, shut the fuck up. Stuff like that. But like little things like remember to bring other people into the spotlight with you and stuff. And even as the GM, there's little things you can do. Like you said, create a connection in some way. Be like, as the guard is talking to so-and-so, be like, just describe for a second, but the guard also gives a quick glance over to and then say their name. And as soon as they hear their name, they're like, oh, what? And then they get a little more connected to it. Yeah, it's always all about branching those connections. I think that one's pretty easy as long as you've got a group that works with you. It depends partly on your players. Keeping players engaged is okay, but also know your players. There are some people that maybe they are just playing to roll dice and kill shit, and maybe the dialogue heavy sessions, maybe they're perfectly happy just watching. Maybe they're a bit of a voyeur when it comes to the RP. That's okay too. You don't have to drag them kicking and screaming into the RP if you know that they are just perfectly happy just like participating by just being there. So I'd say part of it is also know your group. You never know.
Yeah. I would imagine that most dialogue heavy sessions are. It's probably because you've got a read on your table. Most of them like having those type of sessions. That's a hard thing to just like spring on a table of people that aren't accustomed to it. Because like you said, the players are doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that. So unless you've just got one hand at the table, which is what I was for quite a while, then, most people are probably going to be interacting. Another cheap trick, like if you think someone, because like you said, a lot of people will just like to sit back and watch. Like when I'm not in a scene, I'm completely comfortable just sitting back and watching everything that's going on, because I enjoy the experience of watching the story roll out, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything when I'm watching other people roleplay. It's very possible people are doing that in those scenes, but if they are uncomfortable or you're worried that they're feeling left out, you can also, a cheap trick is to be like, as you're seeing these people have this conversation and you're doing this, currently what is your character thinking? Like, how are you reacting to this? What's your kind of, give them a moment to have like a little bit of internal monologue or something, so that they do feel invested, and so that they don't feel the pressure of having to role play back and forth with the NPC or the player. They can kind of contribute themselves to the scene and add in it without having that, that spotlight thrust on them completely.
That's a nice tip. I like that one. That's a good one. Yeah, just to have like a sidebar basically. So they're in it, but not in it at the same time.
Yeah,
because you never know. Because even though like I'm a bit of a spotlight hog sometimes. Like you can probably tell I'm one of those asshats. I make all the different voices and do all the crazy shit. But there are even me. There's sometimes I'm just like maybe I'm tired, or sometimes just like something else that's going on is super interesting. Even I sometimes I just want to watch. And sometimes I just want to watch what's going on. Yeah, no, I think we're pretty much on the same beat on that one, for sure.
We nailed it.
Nailed it. So Adventure Time Architect. Yeah. This is a long question. Okay. I've been out of the hobby for a couple of years, and I'm only just getting back into it. I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter these days about character death being traumatic to players and not something we need in our modern RPGs. I've seen these Twitter threads. Fucking Taryn was in a bunch of them, and I think I know who he's talking about. With these people even harassing others that do still have deadly campaigns, which I also saw. I'm not sure what to do. Are these the new expectations in how games are played these days?
Wow. Well, so first off, I'm going to start with, there's a reason why people are encouraged to have session zeros.
That was my first point. Session zero.
What your characters are comfortable with. There's a handy dandy checklist that Monty Games provided. That, it will tell you what you should and should not allow or put in your game if you want to keep these people engaged, if you want to keep them comfortable, etc. So that session zero is to make sure that the GM and the players are all on the same page with what's going to be happening with each other. That's where you address whether or not player death is going to be detrimental to someone at the table or not. That's also the point where it's completely okay to say our styles of gaming are not going to match up with each other. It's totally valid to do that. That session zero isn't made just to handcuff people into a specific style of gaming. It's made to make sure that everybody at the table is comfortable and happy with the game. If the way that comes out means that you're not going to be happy running that game, then it's completely acceptable to say, I think we should split ways amicably. There's no problem with that one. as a person, as a player, I don't enjoy my games unless I feel like if I kick the bomb, it will go off. You know what I mean? Like, I need to know that if I do something dumb, there's going to be consequences for my actions. If I'm out, I'm legitimately at risk. I'm okay with that. That's how I like to drive my stories forward. I've had characters die, and it has sucked because I've had them for years, but it was still an amazing story moment that I would not change. If, and maybe you can bring a character back or whatever, that's a whole other can of worms, but whether or not character death is going to be a major issue should be established in that first session 0, and then you can determine how you want to run your games going forward. Character death is absolutely okay if it's for a lot of people. I've never played a game personally where someone was like, I want no chance of my character dying. There are also systems, there are a lot of systems that sort of like aim toward doing that exactly, where it's like you just play these fun pastoral games where you're just like wandering around and having a great time, and that's completely valid and fine. But again, it's finding your group and finding your table of players that are going to complement the style of game that you plan on running, and that's what's important. And if death is a part of that, then just establish that during the session 0 and let people know. I'm not going to role play your character getting dismembered or anything like that, but there is a chance that if you kick the bomb, it's going to explode. If you yell at the dragon, it might bite you in half. Something like death is a consequence in the world that you're in. And if it's not, then that's okay. You adjust your story, you tell a different one, whatever. But yeah, death is a completely okay thing, assuming you have said it's okay with the table. If everybody's on the same page, you're doing nothing wrong.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as that. It's like, me personally, I've only ever been in one game where death wasn't a thing, and that's because it was Tales from the Loop, where it's in the rules that we're all kids and death's not a thing. Although you still could if you wanted to. Although on the same token, I also did a Kids on Broom game where it was deadly as fuck.
You died all the time.
Like one kid accidentally summoned a teacher halfway into the roof where they died screaming and bloody. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Awesome.
So, but that is a session 0 conversation. Like or in times where I didn't have a session 0, I have like a Google survey form I send out that's completely anonymous. I don't know who gives the answers, stuff like that. Because then you can write what do I want for violence, for gore, for other like blacklisted things. It is not an option to me for session 0 and checklists like that. I think it's a conversation, even if it's a group you already know, because a lot of people are like, I know my players, but the thing is, like, life changes. Sometimes people go through other stuff, and I'd say even if you know the group, maybe once in a while throw it out there anyways. Be like, hey, has anything changed? Does anyone have any like new fun traumas popping up? Like,
exactly, yeah.
So I think it's a good idea to check in again every once in a while.
It's also a good idea to check in because sometimes, especially if it's not an anonymous form or something, some people might feel pressure to not be the squeaky wheel at the table. It's like, I'm uncomfortable with this, but I don't want to be the one person that's making a big deal about it. But then once you develop that relationship and that level of comfort, they might be, ready at another point down the line to be like, hey, I actually kind of check out of the game when this happens because it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. And making sure that people know that's an option is always a good thing.
One rule I have at my table for stuff like this as well with the session 0 is if something is brought up, and if it's anonymous, like through the form or the survey or something like that, if it's brought up, you guys are not allowed to talk about the results, because as soon as you start talking about it, if it's not anonymous anymore, because like someone's gonna be like, I didn't write that, and then it starts to narrow it down. So I like to keep things as anonymous as possible, but if someone does feel comfortable to talk to me about it, that's fine. Part of what they're referencing here, I've seen some of the Twitter threads. I was kind of in some of them. People were harassing other GMs for having like death in their campaign. I'm like, don't yuck someone else's yum. Like, just everyone. I even play different styles of play all the time. Like, people enjoy different shit. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. And I feel like people get a little. I mean, once as a community, we all agreed session 0s are smart and important. That should honestly clear most discourse out of the way. It should no longer be a thing, because if you're doing things right, your people are comfortable with what you're doing. And if you kill their character, they're fine. I mean, if you show up at some charity game or something and just murder everybody at the table, maybe that wasn't the correct thing to do. But, that's also a very quick one sentence like question you can ask people before you run a game, which is, are you okay if your character dies? You know what what I mean? So to me, it's something that's very quickly established. It's easily handled, and it should not be something that people are attacking each other over. I think that's pretty ridiculous, personally.
So Adventure Time Architect, if you see this, it's not, I don't think these are blanket expectations in modern games these days. In fact, I would say that would be a minority. I personally have not played in any game that are this to this extreme. And like, although I love my narrative heavy games, like my Sunday, like Wintermere Fantasy Online, like the risk is still there. Like, don't get me wrong. Some of them have come damn close to dying, but it's still been very narrative and they haven't. Whereas like my Dungeon Slug RPG that I'm like going to be releasing probably the next few months or whatever is a roguelike. Like your character's going to die. It's not win. They're going to die.
Yeah, and it's really strange. I feel like it became almost a part of like the old school versus new school culture war that creeps up every now and then in regards to different stuff. And I'm like, I guess if I had to consider myself a part of anything, it would be the new school style of role playing. And at no point was I ever upset about my character, like not upset, like shocked or traumatized or anything by my character dying in a game. You know, I've always been okay with that. And everybody that I've played with personally, who I would also consider to be fairly new school styles of role playing, also character death is pretty in the cards with them. Like I've sent out a lot of session 0 check forms, and I've personally yet to come back with one where someone's like, I cannot handle my character dying. I do not want to witness character death in this game.
Yeah, I haven't had it yet myself. I'm sure there will be someone. I can think of 1 or 2 players out there that might have been in that. I just haven't played with them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm in any school. Like, to me, I always harp on like systems and play styles are just like tools in a toolbox to me. I don't know if it's like I have too much of like a campaign ADHD thing going on where I want to bounce around too fucking much. But I don't even stick to one play style half the time, never mind a setting. So yeah, I saw some of these Twitter threads. I'm assuming he's referencing the same ones because they kind of grew big. I know my buddy Taryn, Indestructible Boy, and Chris, Street Monk were both like embroiled in them quite a bit because they had some things to say.
I avoid the discourse as much as possible. I feel as much as possible. I'm like, you know what? Play the way that you want to play. That's fine. Now if someone comes to if someone walks up on my doorstep and says some things that I think is fucking stupid, then I'm going to address that. But, it's not, I don't feel the need to put my 2 cents in front of people other than being like, maybe everybody needs to chill out a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty straightforward one. Yeah, I don't worry about these being standard expectations. They're not. You'll be fine. Just have a session 0. I think session 0s are a standard expectation in most games, except for the extreme right-wing pundit groups, which unfortunately are a thing, as I have discovered in the past. Many death threats have come my way, so it's a thing. It's a thing. A unit long enough, you'll find them. All right, I think we got time for one more here. Critical Binkberry. I'm not sure what that is, but Critical Binkberry says, I'm not great at improvising. I usually have to do a lot of pre-planning. What are some techniques or advice you have for improvising on the fly when players do something unexpected or throw a wrench in the planned narrative? This one's going to be a tough one for me because I've always just been a seat of your pants GM. It's the reason I can't run pre-written adventures. I've never been good at that because I'm a very much like RPG Aikido, like go with the flow type of thing. Like I plan everything modular. Like if I plan a goblin encounter, I don't know when or where it's going to be. I'll just throw it in when it seems appropriate, and the players don't know that.
And to be quite honest, that's kind of when I used to run games, I was terrified because it always made me nervous constantly. So I would fill a legal pad with like basically 4 different versions of the same module where it's like, oh, if I do this, then I'll do this, or do this, or this. And then I realized that was just absolutely the worst handle of my time personally. So yeah, what I do now is I'll have a list of encounters essentially, with enough notes that I need, and then I'll pepper those in when I feel the story calls for them. I'm also much more of an improviser. So what I will I'll just have like a little toolbox of stuff that I can use to bridge the gaps to the chunks of story that I want to be able to tell and interact with my players. So like you said, not everybody is going to know that the goblins that they just got thrust upon them they should have encountered, an hour ago. They just know that they're now fighting goblins. So I think just feeling free to like have create these little chunks of encounters that you can just like pop in front of people if they take a left turn and you feel like you need to mix things up a little bit. And then also just getting in front of those left turns with like the parts of the story that you want to tell. I know that's also not that's kind of a thing that people get kind of back and forth on in their community about sometimes too, where it's like, well, you're railroading them. You're just not, forcing them. You're tricking them. And it's like, well, I'm telling a story and this is the way that I can comfortably tell a story and my players are enjoying it. So I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. So that's sort of how I
like the way Brennan Lee Mulligan said it. He's like, it's not a railroad. Mine's a fun slide.
There we go. Yeah.
It's twisting and turning and you don't know where it's going to go, but I still have a sort of a guided path for you. Maybe it'll branch, but yeah. I'm not techniques for improvising. I'm not good at teaching that one because I've always just kind of done it. Modular gameplay is a big one for me. Oddly enough, that stems from like my college degree is actually in engineering, and one of the things they always harped on for engineering projects at the time was design everything modular. So if something goes wrong, you can just plug and play, shift things around, stuff like that. And I always took this mindset to everything in life, and that's one of the easiest things. Other than that, I would say practice a lot of yes and even it's probably seems a little like maybe not extreme, but a little out there and something you haven't thought of. Is there any like improv or acting groups at maybe your local college or something you could join, like to get used to that yes and to go with it, to just fly with it maybe?
Like YouTube videos too. Like if you don't want to go attend something in person, I'm sure there's a lot of like good improv videos on YouTube that you could probably cruise up. But
I never even thought of that. Yeah,
quickly reskinning, like creating these little module encounters and then quickly reskinning the aesthetics if you need to more appropriately fit where the story is now going.
That's a really good point. The reskinning, yes.
Yeah. That way you've got the bones. You just you rip off the goblin skin, pop something else on, and you still have a interesting encounter. You still have everything that you need as the GM to run it, but you can retool it to fit whatever the scenario's in. So just kind of that, like, I know I want my players to meet to end up in the castle where, evil Hansel and Gretel are running the kingdom, and I want them to interact with this. They're going to get there no matter what. It doesn't matter what road they take on the way to the castle. They're getting to that castle because I want to tell that story. I want to see them interact with it. Now, I may have to change what they're running into along the way to fit whatever the moment is. But most of the time, you don't even really have to do that much changing. So, I mean, just maybe step it out and don't be afraid to be modular. I think that is a very good step to improv.
And for the worry about railroading, now railroading to me just means that the players lose all agency. They can't make choices anymore. I think that's very different from having a cohesive story. Having a cohesive story is not railroading to me. And at the very least, even if it is a little railroady, if the rail tracks are hidden underneath the road they're on, they don't know.
As long as the players can feel like they're able to do anything, you know what I mean? Then you're not really doing your job wrong. And as long as you're allowing them to. Now, if no matter what your players are doing, it has literally no impact on anything around them, then yes, you're walking them through your stage play and you're not letting them do anything else that they want to be able to do. But as far as just they took a left down this road instead of a right, now what am I going to do? I can't use the right side encounter on the left side. Well, yeah, you absolutely can. Maybe it's just a little darker over there. Don't feel that pressure. And as long as your players are enjoying it, and as long as your players feel like they've got no strings to hold them down, then you're absolutely fine. In my opinion.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think that's the best advice we can give. I can't think of what else you would give for improvising. Practice and make everything modular. That's all I got. Yeah. And then you mentioned YouTube videos and stuff. I never even thought of looking up. Actually, one thing I have watched before that's helped me with some things like talking with people and stuff like that. There's a YouTube channel called Charisma on Command. Check it out. if you're looking for ways on how to like talk to people socially and stuff like that, it's his entire channel. He's even got like a paid thing you can do. I didn't do it though, but his entire channel is all about social cues and like when to say certain things to like be the funny guy or seem confident or things like this. Honestly, they're really good videos. Like maybe check it out.
I'm gonna. I mean, that sounds like a great channel name, honestly. So.
Yeah. And it's nothing to do with RPG. Like it's actually meant to help you in like your real life encounters. And I mean, we're all antisocial numpties for the most part in this hobby. So probably a good thing for us to watch anyways.
Yeah. Never hurts.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've kept you over the allotted time, as happens with every interview I've done, of course. I don't think any single one of them has gone under an hour. But that's the way it is. Nerds like to talk.
Nerds love it.
We jibba jabba. But yeah, thank you for coming on. Before we go, obviously you've got Harrow to plug, but is there any, you can replug it of course if you want, and is there anything else you want to announce or discuss or anything like that?
Yeah. So Harrow is currently funding on Kickstarter, but it has been available to our patrons in an expanding quick start form for months. So the way our publishing model works is we dig into a setting for a cycle. So this first cycle has been Harrow. We present our patrons with a quick start version of that world that's expanded every month. Nice. Okay. So they get to provide us feedback. They get to they get play testing, all that jazz. And watch the world kind of flesh out in front of them as a part of the Patreon. And then at the end of that cycle, we kickstart it for the book, and then we'll kick off a new setting cycle with our patrons. So very soon, we're going to be kicking off a new setting cycle with our patrons. And then in addition to the quick starts for the new settings, we also, through that Patreon, produce the monthly collections of Cypher Shorts, which the genre always reflects. Always. I talk like we've been doing this for years. Will always reflect whatever the setting focus is. So for this focus, Harrow is a weird fantasy setting. We did like high fantasy as all the Cypher Shorts that we're doing. The next cycle will be science fiction adventure, high adventure. So all the shorts that we release going into the next cycle will be science fiction shorts. So yeah, that'll be a rad thing that's also part of that. So if you're interested in getting on the ground floor of any of our worlds or supporting a small publisher, the Patreon is the best way to do that. That helps take care of us being able to hire artists and things like that. And it's only $3 a month, which is pretty awesome to get in on that baseline. So
pretty affordable. One less coffee, get all free, like awesome swag. Yeah. All right. And of course, links for all of Underground Oracle's stuff and everything will be in the doobly-doo below as you're watching this. So check it out. Of course. Yeah. All right. Well, before we go, I usually give one more offer. Is there anything you wanted to ask me? Any questions you had about me in any way? I usually ask it last because a lot of people are like, I don't know. And then I just cut it. So.
Yeah, you're kind of, I don't know, from an outsider's perspective, you're like a person in the Cypher community. So like yeah, I'm friends with a lot of other creators and stuff. So I guess like, what would be your personal advice to people who are transitioning from creating for another system to coming and creating with the Cypher community in mind?
Well, first of all, embroil yourself into the community. Like it's such a big, like the community and Cypher go hand in hand so much. Like be part of the community to get the feedback constantly for that stuff. And then for creating things in Cypher, aside from getting that constant feedback, don't get locked into the position of this is like D&D or trying to compare it to D&D and like, how are the mechanics for this? Because in Cypher, even though there's a core set of rules, a lot of people, you go from table to table and it will always play dramatically different. It's not like D&D where like you can float from table to table. Yeah, there's some house rules, but for the most part, you know how it's going to play. Cypher's not like that. It's like Lego bricks that people have been building up and everyone builds their house differently. Every table is going to play dramatically different. So if you're designing something, remember that. Keep that in mind that you you put in your world lores, your stories, whatever. But for anything mechanical, give them the Lego bricks. Make sure that they're modular in nature. Make sure it's something they can tinker with, and that because all ciphers usually compatible with all other ciphers, so let them play with their Lego houses. That's my main thing for sure.
Awesome.
That's true with most narrative systems as well. If you're going to do anything like that, for sure.
Awesome. Right. You heard it from himself.
But thank you for being on KED Talks. It's always fun. I just like sitting and chatting. It's less of an interview, and I just like to talk to people. I don't do this for any clout or money or anything because of my particular situation. It's like the chat, meet new friends. Great.
Awesome. I really appreciate it.
As always, for everyone, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one, eh?